Greetings, fellow Hyperboreans. Dave here, the developer of the Hyperborea system for Foundry Virtual Tabletop, back for another video. Today we are talking about release 1.12.4, which came out in the first week of June of 2025. Recording this video a couple of weeks later, just because it took me a bit to get around to it. And what I want to do today is really that release 1.12.4 was all about the custom class editor. There was a couple of other items on there, but I just want to do a deep dive on the custom class editor for this video. So if you're interested in the release as a whole, just check the release notes. Those are all up on GitHub. But in the meantime, let's talk about the custom class editor. So first of all, what exactly am I talking about? If you haven't seen my release notes yet or screenshots in the Discord, basically what you're going to do is you're going to go to the game settings. Now I'm in Foundry Virtual Tabletop. I'm in Foundry version 13 right now. So you just go to the game settings, pop that open again, and we're going to go into configure settings, and we're going to select Hyperborea 3rd edition. I guess it was already on there, so nothing changed. And then you're going to see this thing right here, manage custom classes. Open the class editor. So we're going to do this. Of course, only GMs can do this. Only game masters can have access to this. And you can see I've already created a couple of custom classes. Otherwise, it would just be empty, and it would only have the create new class with the create button and nothing else. But as it is, I've got two classes that I can choose to edit, and that will pop open a new window just like this. And I'll just scroll back up and down very quickly and close that out. And then the initial menu closes. So I'm going to reopen that, and I can choose to delete this class or delete the Beastmaster. But what we're going to do for this deep dive is we're going to create a new class, something I'm just going to call the Chronomancer. And so we're going to give it that name just like that. And we're going to assume that this is some sort of thaumaturgical spellcaster, time-based, thus the chrono part of the name. So we're going to give it a hit die of 1d4, and we're going to say the base class is Magician. So let's talk a little bit about these first three fields. Obviously, the class name is necessary, and it needs to be unique. You would not want to name it the same as anything in the existing system, because that would probably break your Foundry environment, at least for that specific class. So you're going to create it a new name, give it a hit die, and then the base class is used primarily, as you can see in the note there, determines the critical hit and miss columns to use. So it really just derives that, the critical hits and misses. If you don't even do those in your game, it sort of doesn't matter. If you leave it empty, it's going to just default to NPC, actually. Not that it matters, because you're not going to use that, but assuming you're using critical hits and misses, you need to have this base class in here. Okay, so then moving on, we're going to look at the attribute minimums, and this is, as you can guess, these are the minimums required to be able to do this, to be able to qualify for this class. So for a Chronomancer, we're going to assume intelligence has to be a certain level. I'm going to say 13. And I think I'm also going to say that they need to have a constitution of 13. Why? Because I'm making it up, and I'm imagining that if you're going to be dealing with time magic, you might actually accidentally age yourself through mistakes in your own spell casting. So you want to have a strong constitution to be able to survive premature aging. So we're going to say constitution and intelligence are the minimums required to qualify for this class. In addition, we have the XP bonus requirements, so experience point bonuses. That's for the 10-point bonus, 10%, I should say, bonus. And again, we're going to just base it on these same two, Constitution and Intelligence, and I'm going to say 16. You can look at the classes in the player's handbook and see how they work, and that should give you a feel for the kinds of numbers you want to fill in here, and whether you need to fill them in at all or not. As you can see, I left Strength, Dex, Wisdom, and Charisma all blank, because they are not a requirement. You can be a 3 on all 4 of those attributes, and it won't matter. So, okay, so then we move on to the extraordinary feat bonus. And by every other class in the book, in the player's handbook, I shouldn't say every class, but every class that has an extraordinary physical feat bonus, it gets an 8% bonus. That's a straight flat number. It's the same everywhere. And it's either going to be strength, dexterity, or constitution if I remember correctly, the Barbarian class might have both strength and dexterity, or at least it has two anyways. And it's possible that the Berserker does as well. But most classes, if they have this at all, they're only going to have it in one of these three attributes. Since I'm a Chronomancer, I'm intelligence-based, I'm a thaumaturgical spell sorcerer, I'm not even going to give myself anything, so I'm going to leave these blank. But if I was doing more of a fighter-based or a combat-based class, or even, honestly, even a thief-based class, I might focus on dexterity and give them a feat of dexterity bonus. So, but we're going to leave this as is, just going to leave it blank for now. But we do have spell lists. So we're going to give ourselves the Magician spell list. And I could even give myself a second spell list if I wanted to. Of course, I believe it's the Shaman and possibly the Witch classes have two spell lists each. But the point is you can have up to two. And I selected up to two rather than say up to three, because in the player's handbook, no class has more than two spell lists accessible to it. I'm just going to leave this as Magician for now. Since I'm doing a Chronomancer, a custom class, you might even want to have a custom spell list. That's outside the scope of the custom class definition. It's outside the scope of this discussion. Just suffice to say, if you wanted to have a custom class list, you might just need to select Magician and then sort of ignore it henceforth, which you can do in the character sheet anyway. That's mostly there for reference in the character sheet. It doesn't actually enforce any rules. So, when you've got a spellcaster class in your character sheet and Magician is set as the spell list, you can drag in spells from the Druid list or the Cleric list or the whatever list if you want. It doesn't have to be specifically Magician. There's no logic enforcing that in this system. So this is, again, just for reference to the player, really. So we'll just leave that there, though, Magician. Then we get to save modifiers. Now, I put save modifiers, but really it's what are the base saves at first level. And you can see the note here, most classes get a +2 bonus on 2 of their saving throws. So what I'm going to say is, we start at 16 across the board, of course, for first level, but I'm going to say that he gets a 14 in sorcery, and then I think I'm also going to do maybe a 14 on devices. And I'm only saying that because I can imagine this Chronomancer fiddling with very strange technologies, lost technologies from the Hyperboreans or the Atlanteans or something like that. And so we're going to give them a bonus on those saves because those are the things that they're most used to dealing with. Ergo, they have a sort of a built-in ability to resist them a little bit better than the other three types of saving throws. So those are your level 1 saves. And then the system handles reducing those every other level automatically as the class or character levels up. So you just give them the starting saves and it goes from there. So for level advancement, then we move into this next. And this looks, as you may notice, very much like the tables that are found for each class in the player's handbook. Now, not all classes have casting ability. Not all classes have turning ability. All classes do have fighting ability. So just note that the XP column, the HP roll, and the FA are all required all the way down from 1 through 12. However, casting ability and turning ability, if the class is not a caster at all, you can and not turning undead at all, you can leave those entirely blank and it's fine. Some classes, I think paladins are like this. They pick up a casting ability later, like maybe level 4 or something like that, and maybe turning ability at level 4 or something. You can leave it blank for the first few and then start saying, well, my casting ability is here and it's going to go like this, and then maybe it's going to go like this, and maybe we're going to pick up turning ability here and go like this, and on down the line, you see. Meanwhile, fighting ability is 1, 2, 3. You can see what I'm doing here. So you could do a class like that, and the system will properly handle. The way this works is this is all part of the level up feature. So the automatic level up feature in the character class, the character sheet, reads these values. And so when a character qualifies for the next level, the system actually looks at these fields and determines, do I need to advance the FA field? Do I need to advance CA? Do I need to advance TA? And if these are blank, it just leaves them alone. If they have a number, it'll check it and update the number if necessary. So I'm going to remove these because we're doing a Chronomancer, and Chronomancers do not turn undead, but they do cast. So I'm actually going to say, this is really their forte, right? So we're going to actually just give them a 1-for-1 advancement all the way down the board. Oopsie, I biffed something there. There we go. And then here we're actually going to say it's really not their fort. So we're going to go like this. So we're going to say it's like that. And then the experience points, I'm not going to fill this all in because it'll take too long, but we might say at first level, everybody's 0. I probably should have just set that as the default, but there it is. Also, we're going to say 1d4. So let's talk about the hit points first. The hit point roll, we're going to do this, and we're just going to paste this all the way down. If you have noticed other classes, they use the same hit die. The way the notation is in the player's handbook is it'll say 1d4, 2d4, 3d4, 4d4, 5d4, 6d4, 7d4. It's always that number times, of the level. But that's really just a notation. It's not like the rules actually expect you to re-roll your hit points from scratch every time you level up. All you're really doing is adding an additional d4 or d6 or whatever it happens to be. For the system, we're going to treat it like this. So we're just going to say 1d4 down the line. But when we get to level 10, as you may have noticed in the past, looking through the player's handbook, classes, when they reach level 10, they no longer roll their hit dice. They get a static number of hit points. It might be 1, as it shows here, per level, 10, 11, and 12. Or it might be 2, or it might be 3 in some cases. It's usually a very small number, though. So we're just going to do 1s because we're only having a 1d4, and it's usually something like 1/4 to 1/3 of the hit die's potential maximum for this number. So on a d4, we're going to go with a 1. And I'm pretty sure the magician is actually exactly like that. So for experience points, we'll go 3,000, and then we'll go 6,000, then we'll go 12,000. And this is what I would do on down the line. For these numbers, they have to be real numbers. That is to say, not decimals. And don't put any commas or anything or decimal points in there, just the pure digits. And you can go on down the line till wherever you end up down at level 12. Okay? Then finally, the very last section here, pretty straightforward, is the starting equipment pack. So as you, again, will have seen in the player's handbook, every class has a starting pack of equipment. And I have set it up this way in these different sections. General is its own section because it's usually the longest part. So, the general might be, 8, 10, 12 items, whereas armor is probably going to be 1 or maybe 2 if they get a shield. And actually with a chronomancer, it's not going to have any. Weapons might be 1, etc. Now, what you do is to add these, you just click the add button for each one of these categories. So I'm going to click add for general. And then you can see I've got a list of items. Now the system is reading from my global folders and my compendia. So folders, we're talking your items right here. It looks at folders and it filters based on names. And what it looks for the general equipment is actually some of the most complicated stuff is the general, the provisions, and the religious, because it does a filter that says it must match one of these words, but it also must not match some of these other words. And so for general equipment, it has to match at least one of the word equipment, the word gear, the word general, the word clothing, the word weapons, or the word ammunition. Now, it may sound weird to say weapons and ammunition, but it's possible some people put things like their ammunition, that is to say arrows, crossbow bolts, sling bullets, in a weapons folder or an ammunition folder. However, they need to be set up as items. You don't set up ammunition as weapons when you create an item. So if I click create item here and I say arrows, I'm not going to create it as a weapon. I'm going to create it as an item. Okay, that would be the proper way to do that. I'm going to do a separate video deep dive on how to deal with weapons and ammunition and all that and how to properly set up these items. But suffice to say, ammunition should be set up as a plain item because that works with the rest of the system in other areas like counting ammunition as it's being used by your bow or your crossbow or whatever, things like that. So anyways, for equipment general, it's going to look for, as I said, equipment, gear, general, clothing, weapons, ammunition. It has to match one or more of those words in a folder or in a compendium. Now you'll notice, let's see, I don't think I have actually any of those except I have weapons. But my weapons just has a handful of little weird things in there. So I don't have any arrows or anything in there. So then it's going to check compendia next. So if I go to compendium, now this is the, let's call it the rough draft, early beta Hyperborea compendium, which will be released sometime in the future. I'd like to say near future, but near is relative itself. But this is it. This is the thing that I did for Northwind Games, and you know they now own this, but I still have it for development purposes. So I have weapons all the way down here. You can see it's a fairly lengthy set of items. You can see I've got equipment and I've got it set up as subfolders, clothing. So the system is smart enough to dig through these folders as long as it's matching these words, general, provisions, etc. And it then pulls together everything in all possible matches, sticks it all together, it strips out any duplicates. As if the names match exactly, it's going to strip out any duplicates, and then it sorts the whole thing alphabetically. And you get up with a fairly lengthy list here. As you can see, I'm scrolling through, and we go all the way from arrow quiver at the very top, all the way down to writing stick at the very bottom. And so I've got a chronomancer. So let's say, just for giggles, we're going to say it's going to get a backpack, and then I'm going to add another item. And you'll see there's a quantity here of 1 as well. That's by default, but you can change that, and you should for things like arrows and stuff, ammunition, and some other things as well. We'll do a winter blanket, and maybe we'll just add, let's just add a spell book. We need to add book, comma, spell, for sure. And let's see, maybe we should add, let's just add a 1-person tent, because why not? Armor, we're not going to add anything for our chronomancer. Weapons. These are the preferred weapons, the ones that this class is immediately proficient in using. So we are going to actually say that he is the chronomancer is proficient with a sling. Oh, I should have had sling bullets here. Let's see if I can find bullets. Yes, bullet, sling, lead. There we go. And we're going to change that to a 20. This is one of those instances where it says times 20 there because that's how it's listed in the player's handbook. But the reality is the system treats these as individuals, so you have to have 20 quantities. So you want to set it like that. So we've got sling. Let's add staff, quarterstaff. And we will leave it at, not spiked staff, we want quarterstaff. There we go. We'll leave it at that. And then for provisions, we're just going to add some standard rations. And we're not an ecclesiastical class, so we're not going to worry about religious equipment. But if I did click add, again, all of this, these are straight out of the tables in the player's handbook, by the way. And again, it's pulling from my compendium. So those are all those, but I'm going to just go ahead and delete that because I wasn't going to add anything anyway. And I'm actually basically done. Now, if you have been paying attention, hopefully you have been, you'll notice that this is not nearly enough information to define a custom class for a player to be able to actually use this. It's enough for the system, the Hyperborea system for Foundry, to be able to, one, quick create this class. So I'm going to save the class, and I'm going to close it. If I reopen the class editor, you'll see Chronomancer there. And I'm going to close this. And now what I'm going to do, just to show you how this might work, is I'm going to create an actor, and I'm going to call him Chrono, because why not? He's a character. We're going to create the actor. Now I'm going to find my Chronomancer at the very bottom. Oh, you know what? Because I just created it, it's a funny thing. I forgot about this. It's a funny thing, but you actually need to refresh your game. So I'm going to reload the application. No big deal. Now I should be able to go in here, and Chrono is here, so I should see Chronomancer down here. Yep, there it is. You can see now. So these are my custom classes. They're just added to the very end of the built-in class list. So I'm just going to add Chronomancer. Now I'm going to click Create. And because I filled in the minimums required, you'll notice that his intelligence and his constitution do both meet the minimums of 13 each, and everything else is what it is, because the quick create just works that way. It only tries to meet the minimums, and everything else, whatever it rolls, is what it rolls. So, and then when I level up, I can do things like, you see next level is 3,000. So if I put 3,000 here and I use the quick level up button, it's asking me if I want to confirm. I say yes, and now it does a level 2. Also, by the way, the quick create, so it pulls in my weapons. It would have pulled in armor if I had any, and it pulls in my generic gear. So all that stuff that I selected on the class creation gets added and is pulled in from the compendium. So you can see all these items have gold piece values, they have weights on them. Same with the weapons, they have attack rates, all that stuff that you would expect. It's just pulled in from the items that are in the compendium. So that's how this works. That's how the custom class creation works. Boy, say that 3 times fast. Custom class creation works. And yeah, if you're going to do this, obviously you need to write some additional stuff. You would want to describe the class and what the themes are. For a Chronomancer, I might want to create a half a dozen or a dozen custom spells that are all time themed. It would be totally separate. Maybe I would put those in a personal compendium and make them available to the Chronomancer class. You know, things like that. But that is outside the scope and the requirements for the custom class creation / editor tool. Again, under your settings here, configure settings, select Hyperborea, class editor right there. These are the requirements in order to do the quick create function and the automatic level up function. And then everything else is, you would again just document that elsewhere outside of this particular app. But that's the feature. That is a deep dive at as deep as I think we can go anyway, as is reasonable, and hopefully it makes sense to everybody. And as always, support can be found on the Discord, the Northwind Adventures Discord server. There's a Hyperborea-VTT channel that I keep an eye on, so I can answer questions there. And there's a number of other good folks there that'll answer questions if I'm not available. Okay, Hyperboreans, happy adventuring. Dave signing off.